and welcome everybody to another episode of Keeping It True by You Saints, where we talk about all the latest from the Saints and their biggest moves over the past few days here. Man, the 2025 draft came and went. Felt like it did take a while, but hey, at the end of the day, everything got done, and the Saints kept all 9 of their picks, which is a rarity for this franchise, as well as many other choices that was made by Mickey Loomis and new head coach Kellen Moore. So let's get into it today. Let's talk about all the things. Of course, you had 4 offensive players, 5 defensive players. That's a big change there in its own right. Let's see what we had in this draft. Let's talk about it top to bottom, plus the undrafted free agents, and how this sort of will lead to minicamp coming up for the rookies, OTAs for the rest of the spring, and of course, all the news leading up to schedule release as before we get into the major topics. But of course, if you do not already subscribe to this channel, to this TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, podcast feed, wherever you're finding us, you need to do that now. So that way you can be on top of things. So again, if you're part of the YouTube contingency, thank you again as always for showing up. Please hit the subscribe button. And if you're anywhere else, don't forget to follow, as well as like, share, and comment. I've now appeased the algorithm. We can get back to the episode. So looking at everything that the Saints did in this particular draft, I found it to be refreshing first and foremost, because you really had a different take at it that we haven't seen in a while, just to be frank with you. Mickey Loomis has always been such a win now type of GM who's willing to make moves, trade up, as of course we talked about throughout the process here. To see a actual set of selections that I believe reflects what the organization is trying to do, and to overall achieve what some are calling a rebuild. Although I think it's maybe a bit more of a transition than a rebuild. This is not necessarily just going from a couple pieces here to new pieces. It's entirely pushing out over 2 decades now of buildup that has been sitting there for the Saints, that has been sort of creating a culture that I do not know if the Kellen Moore era will be able to sustain, nor does it want to sustain that. So let's talk about it piece by piece. Of course, we had our episode last weekend that came out that was talking about everything the Saints did with their first round selection. That was, of course, Kelvin Banks Jr., offensive lineman from Texas. And well, for some people, it was surprising to not see someone like a Shedeur Sanders come off with that first round pick in the top 10. We ultimately saw that was pretty league-wide consensus by the end of the draft. But honestly, that was a major piece, and I'll kind of shed a little bit of light onto how the rest of the draft picks then sort of fell in line to make that make sense. So, as we talked about, you had 4 offensive selections that came through. The Saints picked up an offensive tackle, a quarterback, a running back, and a tight end. Now, something to know about every one of these particular players. These are all players who are, except for maybe Tyler Shough, if we're being honest with you, consistency. That's the name of their game. They are so set on consistency. It is truly able to see the focus point that Mickey Loomis and Kellen Moore had. So you take a look at your later picks. You take a look at Neal from Kansas. The guy averaged basically 3.7 yards per carry. Didn't really have very many games where he was taking over 20 carries, so this is someone that's on relatively fresh legs for a high production college running back, while at the same time truly showed that he has unique abilities to be able to create great production. Of course, with the renaissance of Kansas football that we watched over the past couple years, he was a major part of it. Then you look at your tight end selection that you have out of UCLA here. We're going to go with the Mulkey, the first name there, because I'm not even going to try the last one. We'll work on it over time. Don't worry about it. We're going to get there. But this guy had 1 drop last year, 1 drop on over 40 receptions, which I think is very indicative to the type of tight end that he is. But one thing that you also find out if you look a little bit more into the player is that he also has pretty strong blocking ability. So to be able to come in day one, know that you have a solid set of hands that also can block competently as a rookie is an amazing feature and set of skills that will be able to get him I believe, some early chances at playing time for a 7th-round pick. I'm not going to say he's going to crack opening day starter or anything, but hey, we'll see what the rookie does. I think he is one of those sleeper picks that we know this organization is capable of doing. They have found many late-round draft picks that have put in years of production for this franchise, so not very surprising there. Now, when you go to the other side of the ball, then you have your 5 picks there. Defensive tackle, safety, linebacker, cornerback, and a edge rusher. So you cover all 3 layers of the defense there, which was honestly something that some people were thinking may not have happened with the way how this was originally shaping out earlier in the draft, where it seems like, okay, it's getting kind of late. We need to get that secondary help. We need to get that. And what you saw is another set of effectively, I don't really understand in some ways why this draft is being graded so harshly. I can understand what you did with pick 9. I know that is not going to help any media company fall in love with this Saints draft. But honestly, these guys are pretty solid overall. You look at someone like Sanker from Virginia. This guy is somebody who honestly is a tackling machine, puts up solid numbers. You don't really have any complaints there. Of course, you have Broughton, who was your 3rd-round selection as well on the defensive tackle side, someone who can also put a little bit of pressure on the quarterback. So it really shows that you're changing that defensive philosophy as you bring in Bo Davis, who last was coaching at LSU and then previously at Texas in 21-23. And that is where another interesting part of this comes in. You pair offense and defensive teammates from 2 different universities in this draft class with Banks and Broughton from Texas, and then Shough and Riley from Louisville. So the 2 of those together, I believe, could bring some synergy to this draft class. Top 5-round picks that you have as teammates, particularly whenever you have someone like Bo Davis, who coached the 2 Texas guys earlier in their playing career. That really shows you that you have a good opportunity to get to know some of these important rookies from day one as an organization, and that really is critical there. Now, real quick, before we head to our next piece of all this, and who we need to talk about next, it's important that you are, again, liking the video, so that way we can, again, appease the algorithm, get some traction, and we keep making these more often and more regularly. That's what it's about. We got to appease the algorithm. Now, outside of my begging, let's talk about Tyler Shough for a minute. A selection that obviously many people were not very comfortable with, not very excited to see come off the board. And it is the biggest question mark in this draft, to be frank with you. It is something that you still have no Derek Carr update, so we don't know if he does play. It means that you're going to have a 26-year-old sitting on the bench most likely for who knows how many games, and that is never something that you necessarily love, particularly when you're looking at a rookie who's that far along in just their age of life. Although relatively fresh, only 1 full season of playing, and all injuries are non-muscular based. So you have a chance to have relatively fresh legs at 26 compared to some NFL quarterbacks. I mean, you take a look at this guy who came out with Trevor Lawrence and Brock Purdy, and obviously both of them have suffered a decent amount of injuries already in their young NFL careers. So when you look apples to apples, it's not like it's an incredible difference. It's not like it's an incredible set of circumstances where, okay, this guy is going to be some major issue on an injury side or anything, but he hasn't had a lot of time in his work, if you will. Obviously, a lot of the mental game has been developed over the years, even when you are on the bench and you're taking those opportunities to go through your progressions and so forth and so on while your body is resting. You're able to understand your role as a play caller, as a leader during those moments, but at the same time, you're not on the field during game situations, which is, something you kind of need a lot of experience doing. So the judgment will come quickly on this player. Tyler Shough is not going to have a lot of time to necessarily catch his footing in the league because the Saints put him in a position to where that you have an older player. That you need to see him reach certain, levels here, if you will, very quickly. So I honestly don't think it was that bad of a quarterback selection. You obviously saw Jackson Dart come off in the first round. You saw Cam Ward. We knew that was happening. Excuse me. Although, debatably, it was said the Saints were going to potentially try and trade to number one. Probably not. But if they did, it would have been an interesting play. How many picks would you have had to give up to do that? I don't even want to know. And that's where I think this draft class is so critical when we talk about what stage are the Saints at? Where are they trying to go as an organization? Look, nobody, and I would hope it's correct to say nobody expects this team to be competing for much of anything in 2025. I think you have a slight, tiny little narrow window if you did want to make a playoff attempt with a healthy Carr and keeping most of your other players healthy through the first half of the year. Obviously, this will be schedule determinant, which we'll know in May, and we'll be, of course, here to cover that whenever it drops here in a couple weeks, that schedule release. But, to be frank with you, we take a look and you see an updated number from the odds makers. I have a line here that was provided at 6.5 wins over under, with under being the overwhelming favorite right now at -150. This is not something that necessarily speaks to me as setting up for surprise NFC South bid. Of course, you can see on the screen there, plus 1,000 to win the South, which would be guaranteeing yourself playoff position. I don't see a wild card anywhere in this team's future, so it's really got to be through a weak NFC South, which, to be fair, I didn't see any great moves out of the other players in this division. Obviously, some good drafts, don't get me wrong, but nothing world-shaking, nothing that really was a major play. So I don't see the NFC South suddenly accelerating itself, at least next year. Now, 26 could be a different story, don't get me wrong, but I do think this year it's pretty stable. So what you have coming up is you have rookie minicamp within the next 2 weeks. That's going to be very critical as far as what ends up being the first impression of these players in the black and gold, particularly Tyler Shough, even someone like a Banks Jr., because, look, he is someone who is going to have to get ready to be an NFL left tackle, potentially on day one. Now, you'll hear Mickey Loomis talk about during the post-draft press conference that, maybe Talise will stay in the left tackle position, blah, blah, blah. I don't think that's why you draft this guy. I really don't. It's, number one, a big target on Trevor Penning to say, hey, we're not picking up your fifth option. We're bringing in another offensive lineman, and we're one draft away from getting you fully out of here. Do not mess up this year. And for someone who struggled a lot during his first years as a Saint, now's the year to perform. It's beyond a contract year at this point. It's a direct ultimatum from the front office, and that's the meaning of the business. You have to be ready to make moves when the time calls for moves to be made. But overall, a lot of these other guys, I think we're going to have to see how they play out early in the year. But a lot of interesting players who are pretty solid overall. And that's why my personal True Bayou media grade for this draft is I'm going with a C, just a plain C. I don't think this draft was anything particularly spectacular. I don't think it was something that is going to sell any tickets to get people buying a full Caesar Superdome come August, because it's really not that big of a draft. You get solid role players, hopefully long-term starters in your first 3 rounds, and then beyond that, you have some great opportunities. I do think your linebacker you take out of Oklahoma, he's a stud. You'll see him playing for a few years, I believe. We hope that the cornerback and the safety end up working out, because if it's not, then you're so thin it doesn't even matter at this point. It's just going to be something that we, of course, watch. We see when the schedule schedule drops. Now, it's very important here that you do like and subscribe and stick with us, as we, of course, are getting ready for all the important news that comes out in the early part of May with your New Orleans Saints. We're going to be covering it. Some people aren't, but of course we will be here. Excited to have you with us. Thanks again for watching, everybody. We're kept it true by you, and we hope that you stay with us and keep it true by you and us. Hey, thanks for watching, everybody. Don't forget, like, subscribe. See you in the next one. This has been a True by You Media production. This show is for entertainment purposes only and does not render legal or financial advice. Remember to bet responsibly. Distribution of this podcast is prohibited without the express written consent of True by You Media or its subsidiaries. Thanks for being true by us. We can't wait until next time we keep it true by you.